Good evening and welcome to the 25th edition, Time of the Writer Festival. Today we are here at the roundtable discussion with the title, Could This Be Love? And tonight I have the honor of speaking to four wonderful women who all share their individual experience on to interracial relations. So I will start first with introducing them all. So, Goitseone Montsho, welcome. Hello, and how are you? Yara Nakahanda Monteiro, Jennifer Neal, and Marie-Sophie Adeoso. Welcome, all of you. So great to have you here. So let me know, how are you feeling tonight? Maybe we start with Jennifer.
I'm feeling good, thanks. Ready to discuss all things interracial relationships.
Yara, how are you feeling tonight?
I'm feeling fantastic as well. I'm currently talking from Berlin. So it's been very good to be here with you, beautiful woman, and I'm looking forward for this conversation.
Goitseone, how are you doing?
Thank you for asking, Alexandra. I'm doing wonderful. And yeah, I'm also in Berlin and I look forward to talk about love. I think it's a wonderful topic. So yeah.
And Marie-Sophie, how are you?
Good evening, I'm fine. Thank you, Alexandra, and welcome to everybody else here. I'm curious to join the conversation with you and hear about your experiences.
Great. So you all have something in common. You all have written a very great and insightful essay about your personal individual experience within an interracial relationship. And it's all in the Intercontinental Anthology. So I would like to dive in first into your different, maybe different essays that you wrote. Maybe Marie-Sophie, we start with your essay. It's called Inside Out. And there you describe maybe in overall, you describe your relationship with your husband. Your husband is from Nigeria, a man from a Yoruba man. And maybe you could share a little bit how basically something that is so beautiful, love, first sight, all the kind of butterflies. How are the butterflies in Germany when you are in love with a man from Nigeria?
How are the butterflies? Well, I have to think back because our relationship lasts for, I think, almost 15 years now. We met in 2006, and actually we didn't meet in Germany, but in Nigeria. So in my essay, I also ponder about the difficulties of having a relationship that crosses continental borders and what it means to live a relationship when one of the partners is living in a country of the global south and can't just travel to see you and meet you in Germany as easily as you can travel from the global north to the global south. There's an imbalance there, and we made our experiences with that imbalance. So that is one aspect I'm tackling, like visa issues. But when Stephanie, the editor of the anthology, was asking me to write an essay, what first came into my mind was the discrepancy between how I and my husband, how we are seeing our relationship and how the outside world is looking on it, and the kind of questions we encountered or faced when we first met, and other people got to know about us falling in love and what they asked us. So that is an issue I've been reflecting upon in my essay.
You describe very well in how far, especially for those of us who are socialized in Germany, certain questions that are for a German understanding, very personal, very private, very boundary crossing, so to say. Questions like, do you think he would be faithful? Or questions like, is he doing this just for the resident permit? And other sort of issues. Were you aware before how strangers, outsiders would interfere to that level, or within your relationship?
No, I think I wasn't aware. I mean, I think I probably assumed that people would be curious. Of course, if you fall in love newly, your friends, your family, people, of course, ask questions. But I think I wasn't aware beforehand how intriguing questions could be, or how different they are, how they see you, and how, yeah, you also have to find a way of how to deal with privacy. You need to see, like, what questions do we actually want to answer and which questions don't we want to answer. And it's not only questions. I remember incidents when he first came to meet me in Germany. I think we met about a year before, and then he came to Germany on a visitor's visa. And another year later, when we got married, he now moved to Germany. And I remember an incident where we were in Munich, where I was doing an internship at that time, and we were sitting in the park, like a spring day, in maybe April, May. The sun was shining, we were having a picnic, and then there was this old couple passing by, old white couple, and all of a sudden the man was taking out a camera and was snapping us. And we were like getting up and saying, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" And they were just like, "Yeah, we wanted to take a picture of you because," and then they were kind of justifying it that they didn't see couples like us all the time. And we were like, "Excuse me, we don't want strangers taking pictures of us." So at times it felt a bit like we were, yeah, I don't know, so some kind of animal in the zoo people are looking at. It's not like that nowadays, after so many years that we are together. I think I also kind of tackled that in my essay, that after a while, the interest goes away, because somehow one has become normal, or maybe even a bit boring to others. So it's not like we are still facing those questions all the time, unless we are meeting new people, maybe. But at the beginning, when we were still in our early 20s and our relationship started, we encountered those questions a lot, and it felt strange, and we had to find a way to deal with it. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for sharing this moment, and especially this significant incident where you probably felt like back in the days as a single woman, no one ever just randomly took a picture of you. So it was probably some kind of unwanted admiration, curiosity that probably they faced towards you. Let me move this particular situation in terms of juggling with privacy. I feel like in the other essays, you were dealing a lot with privacy and how people perceive the concept of the skin color in that sense. Yara, in your essay, Sleeping with White People, you basically had an encounter as well where you were basically questioned very directly upon your choice of your husband. Maybe you would like to elaborate a little bit on that one, and on the essay, because this is how it started.
Okay, so so it was a very ordinary situation at dinner, and we were having conversations, and of course it was during the time the Black Lives Matters, and I consider myself an anti-racism activist, and I fight against colonialism, and even my books, my novel and my poetry book talks a lot about the consequences of colonialism and slavery. So I got questioned by this woman. She asked me, how could I, according to my political and activism philosophies, be in a relationship with a white man? And I quite understand what she was getting to, because I am my heritage comes also from the atrocities of the slavery, of the colonialism, and I can be looked as being sleeping with the enemy. Yeah, if we could use this line from the movie, with sleeping with my ancestors' oppressors. So I could sympathize, and I found it very how do you say that in English? A very incisive question. I felt, okay, but I kept on moving. But I could relate to her because there was a time as well that I went to the Elminia Castle in Ghana with my husband. And when I was listening to all the atrocities, I think I gave him such a look that he turned to me and said, "Don't look to me like that. It's not my fault." So the question, or what I've tried to explore in my essay, is more around, should love be political? And I went through, so I come from Angola, and I also describe how a Black woman, or me as a light collar Black woman, is being perceived in different geographies. So when I went back to Angola, I was around 27 years, Angola by that time, there was going through an economic boom. So you had a lot of expats. And when I say expats, the majority were talking about white male. So they would look to Black women like we were, again, objects, and that would be easy to get them. So being sexualized as well, or being or being considered as exotic, it was something that was constantly and present every time I would go out with my friends, for instance. There was also a particular situation that I was just with a friend, just having a drink, and for 3 different times, 2 different guys came to us, tried to approach us in a very bad way, and the 3 of them said, "Oh, sorry, I thought you were Angolan." And then I said, "Okay, come on, let's make a pause here. In your head, what it means to be Angolan, what it means to be a Black woman." And this is also a type of neo-colonialism that it's present in societies. And again, that the black, and if we go a little bit back to the Portuguese history, the Black home was used as part of the colonialism strategy. So the Black woman was an object to perpetuate the colonialism through the Portuguese. It's different, for instance, that rather in South Africa and other countries, but this was used to demonstrate that there was a racial democracy. Yeah, and it's still present in today's world. And it's more acceptable, for instance, to see a Black woman with a white man. Yeah, but it's not as acceptable to see, or not acceptable. Sorry, it's more common. By that time, it was more common to see a Black woman with a white man. Yeah, because that was. That's what they used to do. They used to rape women. They used to arrive in country, get a women. It wasn't consent relationships. Huh? My grandmother, not grandmother, my great grandmother, she was forced to marry a white man. Yeah. So all these questions is still also in my mind sometimes. Should my love be political? So. The approach that I have on my essay is it's really what is the heritage of non-consent love on my today's relationship, because sometimes we get some stress as well.
Yara, thank you very much for sharing this insight and also putting it into context with the history of Angola, where probably we find other African countries where there was a different history. Maybe Goitseone, maybe you would like to share a bit about your experience, because you described very well how not that skin color is not seen, but how it has been considered in different parts of the world. Because I felt that in your essay you described very well how is it if you come as a woman with a black skin color to Germany? How is it if your white partner comes to South Africa with a white skin? We all see the color, but how is the behavior towards him? So I actually like to hear as well your part, whereby, for instance, in Angola, if I understood right, please correct me, it was encouraged, interracial relations were encouraged, particularly between Black women and white male.
Yeah, that was, sorry, that was encouraged during the colonialism time, because it was the way to perpetuate their stay. So it was not well seen, or I ask old people, have you ever seen a Black man with a white woman? And that never happened. That was not common. And it's different, it was different on today's world, that it's a new type of neocolonialism, in the sense there's a sexualization of the Black woman.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Rotsi, please, maybe you could shed a bit light on your perspectives.
In my essay, Little Bit of Hope, I try to narrate my love story, but also because I live in a racialized body, what comes with being in love and being Black and being queer and being femme. And I think one of the experiences, especially coming from Africa as well, as a key point in this, because oftentimes Black women, I think Marie also touched on this, are seen as sinister or manipulators of systems. And so you're seen as maybe seeking a green card or seeking some kind of financial come up with marrying a white person. And what also I think troubled me as well was the centering of whiteness in the story of my love, because whiteness always was centered in a sense that Goitseone the African was always left to be the African, but the white person's or my white partner's experience of the relationship was always kind of validated, and people almost, I felt like, were trying to save him from me in a sense. And it became very multi-layered, because historically Black women are also have been caricatured as like seductive or wanting, and also with sexual tourism, or even like what Yara was speaking about, the histories of sexual, the hierarchy of sexual nature in between Black and white people, especially in South Africa, keeping in mind that the South Africa had an Immorality Act where relationship like me and my partners were against the law for a certain period of time. And so me coming into Germany was kind of like an othering experience, because I also met my partner in Johannesburg. And I found that he could come into South Africa on a 3-month visa. He still can just, if he wanted at this moment in time, get on a plane and go to South Africa. Nobody in South Africa at this moment in time can just get on a plane and come to Germany. And that is the huge, huge discrepancy. And who gets to sit in visas, who gets to be asked private, often very private questions about their internals or their intentions to love. And I think I touch upon this on my essay about the questions that I was asked, or even being advised by the German embassy, that because you're traveling on a tourist visa, we suspect that you might get married. Please don't do it. And things like that. And all these experiences of also then raising a biracial child, which also brings its own kind of multi-layered experience as a Black woman who lives in a country where my child has citizenship, but I am always on the perimeters of this citizenship or this belonging. And that I even have to take my partner and my daughter every time I have to renew my visa or something like that, because that shows that, like it's almost as if I can't exist without whiteness, which is coming back to this centering of a white person's experience.
Thank you very much for sharing this. You describe very well how the whiteness in your relationship is very strongly dominating to a part or to an extent which maybe you might not have been aware beforehand. You spoke about your daughter being biracial, and I think this is a very interesting point, which leads me to Jennifer, your essay on good white friends, because you describe your white friend, and I think to all the mothers here with biracial Black children, that would be either it has started or it will be a similar experience. But you described very well, Jennifer, how you navigate yourself around, what kind of learning steps you have to undertake when you have a good white friend with, of course, never bad intentions when it comes to being racist. Maybe you can share a little bit, because I loved how you said, oh, I was made to resist, and how you emphasize the strong Black women, all these kind of labelings where we are sometimes even confused. Is that a good thing, or is that now a manifest, or what are that even supposed to mean? Can I be a not so strong Black woman? So maybe Jennifer, you might share a little bit about this experience.
Yeah, sure. So it's funny how friendships often get left out of the discussions in terms of important, intimate relationships in life. And as a queer Black woman myself, I find it actually very important to decenter romantic relationships and to pull friendship right into the middle of that, because friendship is often the basis upon which romantic relationships, long-term romantic relationships, are built. And then when our families, leave us eventually, friendships are the ones that help us to carry on after the fact. So I really wanted to explore that. And I really wanted to explore the sort of nebulous, sinister feelings that can accompany tokenism within that framework. The fetishization that can take place between two women specifically in a platonic interracial relationship, because there is so much of what Goitseone and what Yara were describing that takes place within an interracial relationship between two female friends. And this whole idea of Blackness serving a kind of sinister purpose for somebody who sees the kind of exotic nature that you represent is a feeling that we have to navigate on a regular basis. And it's a feeling that I, as somebody who was raised in white spaces, who went to predominantly white schools, who was raised in predominantly white neighborhoods, is something that I've really had to unpack a lot over the years, especially when I come to a place like Germany, for example, where I am seen as an exotic curiosity. And like Marie was describing, people have taken photos of me on the street, or inquired about my relationship if I'm walking down the street with somebody who's not Black and holding their hand. And because of what happened in 2020 and Black Lives Matter, I think a lot of white people around the world actually stopped to take inventory of their friendships and ask themselves, well, I could confront this post-colonial white hegemonic society that I'm living in and that I benefit from, and maybe work to dismantle and unpack that. Or I could just collect Black friendships like trading cards, and not work in a way to actually support them. And I think about a lot of what Patricia Hill Collins said in her book, Black Feminist Thought, how when we are silent about these things, we're often used to other people's detriment. And I don't think that a lot of white people have really investigated the idea of tokenism. And I don't think they're really ready to hear how hurtful you can be to somebody, even if you consider them to be a friend. And what does it mean to be a friend to somebody who's Black? What does it mean to love somebody who's Black, even if it's just a friend, which is a phrase I reject in and of itself, because my friendship is an incredibly valuable asset. And I wanted to say it's a responsibility to have a friend who comes from a marginalized community, whether they're Black or queer or trans or differently abled, I think that if you love somebody and you want them to be a part of your life, it entails taking up the causes that would give them a better quality of life. And it entails fighting for their humanity. And if you can't do that as a friend, which again is not less than romantic, but if you can't do that as a friend, then how can you do that as a partner, as a spouse, as a parent? It really starts with this idea that who this person is matters just because they're in your life, just because they exist in your life, and that should be enough. So in this essay, I was really satirical, like using all those phrases that you just said about being fierce and yes, queen, and oh, you're a strong Black woman, so I don't have to afford you your humanity the way I would if you were a white woman, because white women are so much more fragile and need to be protected. They need to be supported. Whereas you girlfriend, you got this. So I was poking fun at these things at the same time as I was unpacking them, because this has been a central part to my lived experience on multiple continents in different countries. And I feel like it's kind of the final frontier of interracial relationships that hasn't been explored as much, and yet is equally as important.
Yeah, thank you very much for yes, bringing that into perspective, because I think you're right. Even the title in itself first probably would first think about, as you say, romantic relationships, but then it is not to be underestimated how much relationships in general, even the dynamics of the relationships even changes within the choices of the partners we make. I don't know, Marie-Sophie, maybe how was it basically when you said, hey, this is my new partner? Did you feel that they were also relationships within, like, friendships that changed in a certain way, that you were confronted with things where you felt like, wow, this is how you think, and these are the kind of questions that you are not even uncomfortable to ask?
Yeah, I think if I look back, I don't think I really lost a lot of friends because of that, but there were certain people. I was in university back then, and there were friends I wasn't particularly close with. Some, yeah, the way they looked at us, I felt like, okay, it's not worth the effort to really invest in this friendship, and I rather turn to other people that that don't give me weird looks or questions. But I didn't. I don't know. I didn't really encounter that open racism that somebody said, like, how could you date a Black man or something like that. It's more, it comes up with these well-meaning kind of questions at times where it feels a bit quirky, and it's not necessary. I think the most odd encounters I didn't have with the friends I'm really close with, it was more with people like neighbors or people you know from university or work, you meet once in a while, but you're not that close with, and then they ask you a question or give you a comment, and you feel like, what do you know about me and my boyfriend or then husband that makes you make such a comment. I remember, for example, one time, and I described that in my essay also, when a woman at work that I didn't have a lot to do with, I was new at the workplace, and she was asking about my surname that had changed, and was then saying, when she heard that I just got married and that my husband is from Nigeria, she was like, I don't believe such marriages can last. And then she started telling me a story about a friend's experience with a nurse whose marriage to a Black person it didn't work out or something like that. And I was like, what does that have to do with me and my husband? And so I got to be more careful in the way how to opening up to new people in particular, and what to reveal to whom. I didn't have to break up with my family or with my closest friends or so, thank God. but even within such groups of people, of course, at times you have situations where you feel uncomfortable with, but I always felt comfortable to address them at one point, I could say, or at least say I don't need to have it in our everyday life with our relationship. It wasn't something where I really had to do very painful cuts and say, okay, I'm not seeing that person any longer. But especially, of course, in elderly generations, also there were people, also in my close network, at times asking questions or making comments where I felt like, okay, they are not aware of certain, whether it's language, what kind of language to use, or also the power certain comments can make. I know when I try to tackle the issue of racism that our children face, they're still little, but of course they encounter racism in Germany, in a predominantly white country. And I heard the comment of one relative, for example, yeah, but that is what you choose. And I know the person that said it didn't mean it that way, but it was very, very painful in that situation, because it left me at a spot where it looked like I was choosing the racism for my children, as if I and my husband were responsible for the existence of racism. But it's just very screwed. But that is, you get such kind of comments at times with people that have that don't mean you, or that don't mean to hurt you, but that make such comments without thinking about them and without knowing what those comments really carry, because they have not reflected on the issues of interracial relationships at all, or about racism at all. So they think they are friendly and polite and warm and heartful, but then they come from the side with a comment where you feel like, whoa, that is like you just hit us over the head with a baseball bat, you know. So, but I could, luckily I could say that such situations were rather within my closest network of friends and family, rather the exception. Or maybe we also managed to distance ourselves from certain, let's say, bigger family events also, where you feel like, okay, it might get uncomfortable at one point or so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. By the way, I would like to encourage, because I think we've kind of finished the first sort of introduction round, and I like this to be very interactive, because we all come with different experiences, so it's actually nice. So if there's anything that somebody just said and where you feel like you want to know something about it or address it, please feel free to do so, because I would like us to leave this evening with an exchange where we have different experiences and we can learn from them, because we all live in Germany now and have an experience how Germany is, and we see in how many layers this issue of racism is constructed, in terms of how do we understand racism in Germany in general, because some of us might have the experience that we kind of see it just as a way of a very right-wing violent thing, and everyday racism, we do not understand it fully. And especially Jennifer, your friend, all the incidents with your friend is yes, that is the little way of where one could say maybe in Germany we haven't been taught better, because our past with racism and the different facets on it is a bit different than in other countries. I don't know, how do you feel about it? For all of you who were not entirely socialized in Germany, how did it feel to come to Germany and see even people's understanding of racism?
Well, I have a favorite European proverb, which is, as an American and Australian actually, but as an American with an American accent, when people say to me, "Aren't you glad you're not in America right now?" Or, "Jennifer, don't be silly. This isn't the US. You know, racism is an American problem," as if it's not the most successful European export of all time. America didn't invent racism, it just kind of perfected it. And that's a very high bar to match, because a lot of other countries have definitely made an effort. So I think this is largely an issue of cognitive dissonance and collective cultural denial and selective empathy to a degree in this sort of erasure of Germany's colonial past in particular, and the discomfort that so many people here feel in discussing it, and just the general ignorance of Germany's colonial atrocities, Germany's, the National Socialists' atrocities against Black people living in Germany at the time is also something that's not often discussed. All of this, I feel, contributes to the general anxiety and fear that exists in terms of discussing race, and that quite subconsciously, and in some cases quite consciously, impacts how interracial relationships are navigated in this country. Because you cannot have an honest discussion about how to fulfill your partner's needs if you cannot look at them as somebody who is going to be marginalized in this space. And if you can't have an honest discussion with how your race, whether you like it or not, hopefully not, affords you certain privileges that they will never have access to. And I also want to point out how interracial relationships, like the discussion on this tends to be, the wider discussion on this tends to be like a matter of accessibility for people of color, like what Marie was saying, how, you know, having interracial kids here and maybe they're going through things that white German kids aren't going through, how your friend said, well, you know, they signed up for that or they should have expected that. You know, and I feel like the burden of how we're meant to process these hurtful comments and statements and systems lies incorrectly on us. And it's taken a lot of work on my part, and maybe the rest of you want to contribute to this, but I also think that that narrative desperately needs to be flipped around, because when I hear a comment like that, I think about the moral bankruptcy that it basically points to. This selective empathy about, well, if you wanted to have interracial children and live in Germany, you should have known that these issues are going to happen. So that's a way of excusing the person who says it from having any sort of accountability or responsibility for creating a better society, which speaks to their inadequacy to be a loving, capable human being, to be a thoughtful, conscious, intelligent human being who can show up for everybody within that society. And I think we need to include that more in the discussion about why don't more people, if we're gonna stay here, why don't more white Germans want to engage in genuine empathy for everybody, and what is it about them, what is missing in them, so that they don't have empathy for somebody's child who could be experiencing racism, but they would feel that for a little white girl who skinned her knee. And yeah, that I think needs to be part of the wider discussion. I'll stop now.
Which comes a little bit back to what Yara also initially mentioned, how political is love, or in how far can love be taken away? Because, or when I listen to all of your experiences, in a way, it seems like to make it political or not can't be just simply an individual choice. Even if you make it an individual choice to say it is not, you are sort of drawn either if it's not with your relationship, then probably maybe with the kids, where you enter a structural and institutional system where you are more, if you want it or not, confronted in a way and realize, wow, it is in a way of a political thing. So I'm just wondering, in general, what are your personal takes? Do you have days where it's less political and days where you feel like it will remain, in a sense, never a totally unpolitic situation as of yet? Silence.
I will share. Can I share my thoughts on that? Yeah. So first of all, it was great that I had the opportunity to write this essay, because I think it was really the first time that I had to think about it. And while I was doing that, I had conversations with very close friends of mine that they also in racial relationships. And I note, as I'm noting here, these patterns. But I was more shocked that, and I'm talking about, I'm on a relationship for 13 years, there's one for 20, there's another one for 16 years, that we never shared our pain on these subjects and our histories, that we just swallow it. Yeah, and this is also a great opportunity, yes, to make interracial love and friendship political, but it also needs to be among us. We need to share more. We need to say, okay, if this is really a common problem, what can we do to change it?
Yes, thank you. Especially when you said we need to share it more and discuss among each other. Yeah. One part I liked in terms of, even in the essay, Rutsi, you wrote something about your daughter asking you, am I half African? Am I half German? And you actually say that you refuse even for her to learn to be categorized in those two systems. And you say that she's full African, full German, and a full person of herself. And I was wondering, this is a very, very great, well, it seems like you thought about it very well, what kind of language, what kind of perception we are teaching our Black children, interracial children. And Marie, for instance, have you thought beyond, obviously, if you're white, probably you have never been taught by your mother to explicitly think, I am full white. So now that you have children that are part of your husband and part of you, and then you hear, for instance, the approach that Rotsi has talking to her children or to her child about how she is full of a lot of things and never half. What does that make? How do you feel about it?
I found it a really nice approach. I think in terms of our children, we've not talked about nationality so much, but children, they confront you themselves with the realities they are watching. So my children, I have 3 children now, between the ages of little less than 1 year and 7.5. And I think the 2 older ones, they started when they were about 2 or so to make comments about who's Black and who's white, and how mommy looks different than daddy and whatever. So all those white people mainly that say like, children, they don't notice that, they don't make a difference or whatever. It's not true. They notice at a very early time. And I saw that at times even before they could speak full words, that when you go on a train and there's another Black person, that they would all of a sudden point a finger and say Papa or something like that, where you see like, okay, they make a relation based on what they see. And of course they also encounter, unfortunately, racist situations in kindergarten or school that you have to deal with and that you have to talk about with them. And I try to think of, I like that that idea of saying you're not half and half. I think we ourselves, we didn't use the term half either. We just said you have something from daddy, you have something from mommy, you're a Black German boy or Black German girl or whatever. Those are, I think, sentences or words we've used, but I might have to think about that a little longer. Or most importantly, I feel it's not on us parents to really tell them who they are. We try to, of course, as long as they don't have their own words, we have to assist them, but at one point they have to have the instruments to tackle the reality they are living with themselves, or to define their own identity. So yeah, so for me, especially as the white parents, it's tricky. I can't tell my Black son or Black daughter who they are. I can try to at least inform myself about abusive language and not to use that abusive language, or to see what terms are acceptable within the wider range of community, Black community, and offer it to them. But I won't correct my son if he says I'm brown, just because somebody else says the correct term would be Black German or Afro German or whatever. If my son says I'm a brown boy, then I won't say no, you're not. I might myself not address him like that, but there's nothing wrong about him finding words for himself.
How do others feel about that? Because I like the idea about this privilege of unchallenged self-definition in that sense, and I like the approach how you said if he calls himself like this, then that is fine. That might be the kind of same reaction we in a way also might want this from other, because for instance, if I go to places, I might call myself like, oh, I'm from Hamburg, Germany, and I was born there, so I'm a Hamburger, for instance. But then I have also, but you are a foreigner, as in, if I want it or not, I am also a foreigner, a label whereby, as if you tell me you're German, then I'll say, yeah, but you're actually Bavarian. Technically, that doesn't belong to Germany. Or these kind of, it would not occur to me if you are German, or if you want to be Bavarian, or if you want to not consider this at all, then it's like left to you. Do you feel, how do you feel this concept or this privilege of saying whatever, feeling however you want to be calling or defining yourself, and then it remains like this? Do you have similar experiences that you could do this? For instance, Jennifer, with your friend, did you, obviously beyond your essay, did you have the feeling that you could define yourself or the Black person, that you are not the one that she sees or has put together from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and go with a book of Chimamanda and who knows what? How do you feel?
Yeah, that was actually the challenge. It was, I noticed in these very tokenistic relationships, they're quite reductive because they can't hear what you're saying in terms of like, this is actually who I am. I'm not, for example, I'm not a specialist in hip hop. Sorry. I am a huge science fiction fanatic. I like to surf and I like to hike, and these are things that are unbecoming of the stereotypes that a lot of people expect me to fulfill in a friendship, because this is descriptive of their limited understanding of Blackness. And when they reject these sides of my personality, I do feel as if it is quite colonial, because what you're doing is swooping in and saying, that's not who you are. I'm telling you who you are. I'm telling you who you're supposed to be. And I'm going to filter out anything else that doesn't fit in with this prescribed idea that I have. And it's so funny, but when you manage to develop the language to describe this form of psychological violence, then only then does it become possible to actually reject it. So I am fully on board with all self-determining ideas on race and identity. And I do think that, this whole idea of sweeping Blackness can be a bit problematic, because it reminds me of the paper bag test or the single drop of ink in the well. And, these were inherently racist and horrific things that were meant to exclude, not to include us, but to exclude us, not from whiteness, because we're never going to be white, obviously, but to exclude us from the privileges that were befitting to whiteness. and rejecting those principles and letting people decide for themselves what their identities are, I think is a very important step at acknowledging humanity in that person and saying, I don't have the right to tell them who they are or how they should identify.
What do you think? I felt like there's something I've noticed that is probably also a lot done in Germany. We like to discuss things on a very high, in German we like to say meta even. So it becomes in the sense of very abstract, lots of very theoretical aspects, whereby as we kind of at the end notice the person, oh, but I didn't mean that, or oh, and then at some point we do not have to forget we end up being in a very quite intellectual bubble that is this kind of level that not everybody might perceive it. So if we now kind of take 3 steps back and should just say one thing, one advice, one thing that you would have liked a person to do in a simple way, like if your white neighbor comes and is trying to be, I've seen a movie again, seen all this injustice, and I would like to change this. And on very, very fortunate day, I have a black neighbor now. So since we cannot avoid each other, what would be the first small step that you would recommend? I start. I have a friend and I just told her, see, whenever a person of color, whether black or hijabi, or you name it, queer, anything, tells you, I do not like this because this and this, you say, oh, thank you. I didn't know that. Thank you for making me aware, and I will not do this the next time again. I do not want to hear how your great-great-grandparents even used maybe such and such expression, how I'm not considering you as the offspring of the entire evil, how I do not devalue your ambitions in, I don't know, voting for green parties, dividing your rubbish, being a vegetarian, all the good things that you do in life. Just take it from me. I said, I don't like this. I don't say you are a bad person in general. I say, I don't like this. Yes, thank you. I will not do this again. This would be my small advice or step. I like it if you could start. This was the one thing I told her. This is what I would like you to do. And tell your friend, if next time somebody doesn't like anything, you just say, sorry, I'll not do it again. Now I know. So next, who has the recommendation?
I think I would start at white innocence. This is the perceived idea that all white people are innocent and do not have to learn or understand their own benefit and the way how they contribute and continue to benefit from racialized violence. And the second thing would also be that there can be no love without intentional justice. And you cannot say you love someone, but do not want them safe in rooms where you maybe have your racist friends in there. You cannot say you love someone and then introduce them to your uncle who is maybe, has conservative ideas and not defend them publicly when white people, come for them or make them feel unsafe, and that love holds hand with safety, and that the minute you fail to keep a marginalized body safe, love leaves the room.
Thank you. Next.
I also would pick up the one in the white innocence, because I think it's the more recurrent that I find. And also what really gets me on my nerves, it's when also these white innocents come to the Black community and discredit when you say, I suffer racism. Oh, it wasn't that. Yeah, there's always a discredit of when someone says, and this is, I'm not, just to clarify, I don't live in Berlin, I'm now in Berlin, but this is something very common, at least in Portugal, that when people feel discriminated or racist, they always get discredit. No, it's not what you were seeing. For sure, you've been crazy. Now you're seeing racism everywhere. So I think also I would appreciate if people would stop with that.
Yes, great. Next.
Okay, just to build off of that, I would say, I mean, the short version would be to grow up. I'm building on this white innocence thing, but that's the short version. The long version is because of what Yara and Goitse were saying, how this whole idea of white innocence is really central to this problem. Like, oh, I didn't know, or, I'm not the bad person, and why are you making me feel bad or feel guilty or whatever? That is a very infantile response to somebody who you supposedly care about saying that you hurt me. So growing up and really reckoning with why you feel the need to constantly use and weaponize your white tears to avoid accountability, I think is central. And if I say to somebody that comment was racist, you don't get to say, no, it wasn't. You kind of have to sit with that discomfort. You definitely have to sit with that discomfort and consult the infinite library of resources that are available to you into understanding why, rather than assigning me as your personal anti-racism guru, because that's not my job.
Thank you. Marie.
Yeah, I think I have little to add to those great comments all of you gave. What I would like to say, though, is that people that question experiences of racism, or that apologize for what they did in a way that just helps them to feel better, not the attacked person to feel better. I feel a lot of those people, they're actually inherently lazy, like those white people that didn't do their homework. They didn't inform themselves about racism, about a lot of the reality they are living in, and then they are using their Black counterparts to now do the work for them. And I feel that it can't continue like that. So if I would see a person, I would say, do your homework and inform yourself. There are so many books and resources out there now where people already describe what racism is, the history it has, how you can be a good ally or work on being a good ally, how you can, what kind of privileges you enjoy as a white people, and what you can do with those privileges to make the life of others better. So I feel the last person that should tell those white people what to do is the Black person that just suffered some kind of racist comment by them. So I don't know if I would be the white bystander in such a situation. It would be more my job to correct my fellow white person and say, like, hey, what you did was wrong, and you should inform yourself better and apologize for what you just said. So I can just I admire all of you for the patience you're expressing here by enduring a lot of those situations in everyday life. But I'm kind of getting entangled in my argument. What I wanted to say is that a lot of white people just need to inform themselves about what they do or they don't consciously want to do harm. Because most people say, like, I didn't mean it like that, I didn't want to say that, but they do it out of ignorance. And I feel in many other fields, people wouldn't allow themselves to have such ignorance or to show such ignorance. They would feel ashamed of themselves. But on the field of interracial relationships, they don't feel ashamed to show that they don't have a clue. And that keeps surprising me at times. But of course, I saw that in myself over the years in the relationship of my husband also, that I had to learn, because the way we grew up, and we grew up in a society that is inherently racist, and where whiteness is the norm. You grew up and you don't know better. But when you're an adult, you don't have an excuse to stay at that level. You can inform yourself and become better, although you might have not learned it as a child.
Thank you for all your comments and all your how you basically captured what would be the next step, because sometimes I feel like it's important, even if we have spaces where we share our experiences, our different experiences, and can learn also from, I don't know, I love just the different perspectives from all over the places. That helps me as well a lot. I like also the idea to think forward. What is, if I have to capture in a nutshell, what would be the next steps? And could you imagine yourself maybe in, let's say, job interview? Where do you see yourselves in 5 years? So imagine, could you imagine yourself in 5 years or in a year to write another essay where you describe what's it called? A dystopia of the perfect scenario. How, imagine yourself, it all started again with the relationship. You had this butterfly, you had this friend at work, and you write the ideal scenario, how it should have been, and not how it actually played out with all this barbecue thing and you standing there on your own. So yes, that would be an anthology that I would actually love to read. Like if we all have now in the perfect world where I can have everything, and your writers, so it's like you write down the perfect scenario, how you feel like you want to be treated, how you treat other people, how in that way it comes back. We can all be a little bit inspired about how we treat other people and how we would love to be treated as well. Yes, maybe we will see that anthology and might find ourselves again in a similar space or even live. Yes. So far, thank you very much for all of your inputs. There's one thing where I felt like it was interesting that I want to talk about is a language. Hotsi, you also mentioned language as a part that we are now using English. For some of us, English is not our first language. For instance, Marie-Sophie and I, our language would be German. And Yara, what would you say would be your first language?
Portuguese.
Okay, and Hotsi, what would you be your first language or the language of your heart?
The language of my heart would be Setswana.
Ah, nice.
Setswana.
Jennifer?
Sorry to say it's English.
Oh, no, at least one person has to be.
No apologies.
No, because I like the variety, because now we all end up speaking English, but I like how we use different languages to borrow different concept of self-affirmation, self-definition, because my parents come from Ghana. They speak Tree to me, although it's not my first language. I'm not as proficient as I'm in German. It is the language where I've experienced love, where I have affirmations of how great mommy's daughter is, like all the kind of, sometimes I find myself, I cook something and I think it's very nice. And I remember the words my mom said when I was little and I did something right. Sometimes I keep saying the same things to my adult self as well in that particular language. And then sometimes I think about in how far does the current language that we use subconsciously or consciously sometimes define our state? Do you sometimes find yourself using even a language where you feel like, wow, why am I still saying this? Why am I still using this kind of language? Do you have moments where you caught yourself say, look, how I'm talking about myself or describe a situation?
I would say simply because I wrote about it, English was not my first language. I spoke Setswana, and I felt moving to Germany that learning a second colonial language was just one of the worst things that could ever happen to me. And I think it's also why it took me such a long time. And it even today, I think there's a form of resistance almost. I can feel all my ancestors in me saying, no, child, don't do it. And it's almost something that I'm also kind of sometimes ashamed, because this is the language my daughter grows up speaking predominantly. And this is the language that, and even though my attempts at teaching her the Setswana, which I'm sure, Alexandra, you have this experience because your parents speak Twi, And my daughter also has the same experience where teaching her a language in an environment where I am actually almost the only person who speaks this to her has proven to be quite very difficult, where something is also being lost in this interracial relationship then, because that's also what I was speaking to previously with the centering of whiteness, where even culturally, because my child is growing up in Germany, even though she's growing up from these two different cultures, the dominant culture that is fed to her, that is insistent on her, is that of her white parent. And that is something that I'm still navigating in my own ways and trying to put it. But I also find that the burden then lies on the Black parent to give the culture to the child, which I find is so unfair, because Black parents in this constellation usually are very aware of white culture. Black parents in this constellation have read white literature forcibly throughout, whereas the white counterparts do not, I feel, sometimes make as much of an effort, so that the burden of educating their Black children on their culture does not only lie on the Black parent, but that actually you start to learn a new language, for example, which is something that I've discussed with my partner. Which is why I think the resistance for me to learn the language comes from, because in my thing, I'm like, you have not learned a word of my language. And yet every single time I'm expected to be fluent in the language. People in this country cannot say my name properly, yet I am expected to speak in this language. And so it's been something that has been, on my mind a lot.
I could add something to that maybe, because I can see it from the other side as the white parent, and in raising our children, it was similar. My husband grew up bilingually with Yoruba and English, but Yoruba is his first language that he took from his parents, and English came in school. And I grew up with German, and we now live in Germany, and so German is all around us. And when we were discussing of how to raise our children, the idea was also that he will speak Yoruba with them, because English they might learn later anyways in school. So we didn't consider it as important. It is kind of our secret language at times, because my husband and I might speak English once in a while, but the children only get it in passive ways. But as you have pointed out, it's not easy to give that language to the children if the environment is not really backing it up. There are no bilingual kindergartens in German and Yoruba. There are no children books around that you can read to them at night that are written in Yoruba. So it's really, I couldn't really say that they grow up bilingually. They get it a little bit emotionally from my husband, but it's a lot of work for him to keep it up, because he has to keep it up against German from the environment. And I don't know, maybe at times when there are two parents that give a language to their children, it might be easier. But in his case, I can't bug it, because I only speak a few phrases of Yoruba, and we can't even get the materials to give them a whole lot of Yoruba literature. So I can relate to that feeling from the other side of the parenting.
Yes, in these terms, I agree. I noticed, like with friends where not both parents are not speaking the same African language. My parents both speak Twi, and German is not their first language. So it did help, because it's like we all sit at their table, or when they would speak to each other, they would speak Twi. So at least you have something to listen to, and then you have ways to express it. Then, however, for me, it was important nevertheless. Probably I didn't realize it when I was young, but I was actively forced. Well, forced is maybe like I was more pressured to speak Twi, because my parents would better understand. Like sometimes I would speak German and I would go so fast, and you have my mother listening very carefully, and you feel like, oh, please, can't you just say it in Twi? And then, yes. And that is the way which kind of more and more enforced me. But then yet, where I grew up, there's a large Ghanaian community. So the majority of my tree, I always like to say when people in Ghana hear my tree and they say like, she knows deep words, because obviously my parents, they speak old tree, but it sounds different. And I said, well, this tree is made in Germany. It's a Buckeye tree. It's very special, and you can only learn it in Hamburg that way. So I definitely understand the challenges, because I have never had the tree book myself either, or been exposed to literature and all these kind of things. So I get the challenge, definitely. Any other comments? Otherwise, I would love to read. There are some comments from the audience. Yes, I should read it. All right. So there's one comment. Great discussion. I think the point raised around the relationship between love and responsibility is important. That responsibility relating to issues and struggles faced because of race or disability, etc., these should become shared because of love. Challenging these stereotypes and discrimination, e.g. white privilege, exotism, etc., is not and should not be borne only by the recipient. It should affect all of us, more especially if we claim to love. The second one from Aisha Kage. The worst thing I've experienced is in an interracial relationship is the subtle and patronizing and totally unwanted conferring of honorary white statues when you are the only Black person around. And then again, one, great recommendations, boundary setting, and instances in openness. Consent and respect is the key. Yes, these are some of the audience, yes, basically comments. So I think like they are learning as much as I do from these conversations and gaining a lot of different perspectives in terms of languages. And what do you feel in terms of how does our language, whether in English, because for instance, I would say in German, a lot of Black people, we borrow a lot of terms from the English because we don't have them in German, especially when we talk about our hair. So, the African American culture has been very leading in terms of having certain things to label at all in Germany. And I once had to just, for a friend who produced a product for coily hair and all this, so she asked me to translate it in German. And there was one term, I think the English term would be frizzy, and in German it is called Krause. And I felt like this is already where it starts. Frizzy for German hair is more hair condition that has to be tamed. And I've Googled it. There is, for the word Krause, it is not neutral, it's negative, it's a negative connotation. It's not a hair situation or a hair type. It's not a hair type that is positive. So I felt like it starts with this. How can I describe my hair type as frizzy or Krause, where someone else wants to use that or that product, and then it becomes not frizzy anymore. My hair is how it is, and it is nice the way how it is. So I wanted to find words that acknowledges different types of curls. So I was really looking like, I don't know, how do you, for instance, describe tighter curls to your children? What words would you use, so to say? So I was looking for different words. Really, like my curls are engmaschige Locken, for instance, which means they are very tight and narrow curls. Because I started, no, it's like just because I grew up with it, our children should have better words to express their hair and feel comfortable with it. Because how can somebody have long hair, sleek hair, curly hair, and then you say your hair is frizzy? My natural hair type is frizzy. So that's one thing where I feel like, how do you feel like language is something where we have to be more conscious about sometimes? Yara, please go ahead.
This conversation also made me think about words to describe bad words, of course, racist words, to describe interracial couples. I'm talking about interracial couples and not as much about kids, because I don't have kids. But for instance, in Portugal, it's not that common, but it's still there. People can easily say coffee and milk, or you don't, or someone that don't like mixed couples. I've heard that expression from a person that I know, not me, but someone told me that she was with a boyfriend in the street, and they said, "Oh no, we don't like mixed couples. You can only mix stuff in salads." So there's also an aggression language and expressions that it's been used against interracial relationships. I'm not sure if you have more examples to share.
I think the experience I would also like to share is one of positive racism, if racism could ever be positive, but people thinking that being in an interracial relationship is going to end racism, that my biracial child is the solution to ending racism. And those have been like kind of things that have come across a lot, especially also from some Black community members, because of internalized racism and colorism and so I found that a lot, even if you look at social media, like mixed babies and so I found that language can be very hurtful. And even though some people think it's like very, very positive, or like, oh my goodness, we're going to save the world, it can also be very anti-Black. Because if we need to have interracial relationships in order to cure racism, then who are we erasing in order for this to happen? And for me, it's just been like, that kind of realization of the anti-Blackness of the language around interracial relationship.
And I just give that example, that exactly the interracial relationships and also biracial people were used by the Portuguese as a political and marketing propaganda to demonstrate, oh, look how good colonial we are, because we have diversity of colors. And it is all not it was not honest. Yeah, but it's exactly what you just say. It's a type of neocolonialism, believing using interracial relationships or kids to show that this is a way to end racism, or there's no racism in our country because we have all colors. Just also to add on that, because it's a very good point. Even in Portugal, they had a small stamp that during the colonial time, with all the different colors. Yeah, just to demonstrate, look how multicultural, multiracial we are as a nation.
And I just want to point out, maybe it's because we're in Germany right now, that whole idea is extremely eugenicsy. This idea that you can breed out less desirable qualities if, their partner is white, so their children will be lighter skinned. So they'll have more of this and less of that. And it's this whole idea that human beings are like test tube experiments that you can use to create this hierarchy of who is more desirable versus who is less desirable. And for the people who say that, interracial relationships or interracial children will end racism, I mean, they obviously haven't been introduced to colorism or Brazil, which is the best example of how that actually doesn't work at all. And this idea that in eugenics, or any kind of pseudoscience that was popular by the Nazis, like phrenology or whatever, it's this idea of taking people's body parts and divorcing them from their humanity and saying that, a pointier nose is more attractive, or straighter hair, is more attractive, and kinky hair, which is one of my favorite words to describe 4C hair, which is what I have, that idea of kinky, how that in itself can mean something sexual, which could be great, or it could be terrible, depending on how boring you are. Or it could be a reference to something that's just not quite straight, not easily acceptable, not something you want in your life, not something palatable. And how these words are used and racialized as well, in terms of breeding people out to be whiter. And that also needs to be examined in terms of how we describe it with language.
I might like to add maybe that in German, I find it difficult to find even a word for biracial relationships, because to translate it literally, to translate race literally is already difficult and leads to very strange and wrong translations. So, but apart from that, I don't know, I don't want our relationships and I don't want our children to be permanently categorized. I don't want to give terms, I want to give my children terms with which they can feel comfortable if they want to call themselves, but I don't want to tell other people what they can call my children. I tell other people the names of my children, and they shall call my children by their name, and they shall call my husband by their name. And I find it odd that people always come to one and ask, like, how does one say correctly, or how should one address them correctly? And then, because I think, like, how would you address a white child? How would you address my husband if he was white? Why does there need to be a label? Of course, I know that there need to be political categories. I don't want to go into a direction now, like I don't see colors and one shouldn't name realities, but when it comes to normal everyday encounters and relationships, one doesn't permanently need to name Black people only if whiteness isn't named, if the white child isn't named, or other children aren't named. So I don't want to give people a term to replace something like mixed child with a better word. I will give them the name of my child.
Yes, we are almost facing the end of our great conversation, and I actually like, again, the different perspectives and point of views, and even what you just said as a closing point. I like that you say the desirable impact, because if you say this to another white person, it makes clear how little definitions and names you generally need. Usually you lived your life perfectly without labeling other people, and you are a perfect example. Apparently, if as a Black person you tell a white person, why would you label me anyway? It's not necessary. It's probably, it doesn't sound so authentic. But then if you say that it functioned all the while, we always do not label anything else. Why is it just for this particular incident that we basically want to emphasize on it? Maybe the thing that you want to even say doesn't even matter whether the color is like this or not. But this is something where if you do promote this, your perception, this view, maybe it will also be an impact for someone else to maybe see things a little bit differently, or stop this kind of, you need to like rap music, or if there is, I don't know, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air on the radio, then they turn their faces to you and what do you want me to do now? Did my father write this song? And that is the kind of thing where you feel very strange when people say like, oh, I love Nutella. Is my father the owner of Nutella? Unfortunately not. So basically you feel like it would be nice if you could at some point move away and see, oh, wow, there's so much more behind this beautiful color. All right, ladies, last words or something, then we can, just say maybe our goodbyes. But it was wonderful to have each one of you here tonight. And I'm very honored, yes, that we had this opportunity to come together on this Saturday.
Thank you for moderating, Alexandra, and thank you everybody else. It was really great to hear all of your perspectives and your experiences, and I'm looking forward to reading your essays in full.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah, thank you from my side also. I'm really looking forward to the full essay collection on this topic because I can see there are so many angles to it and so many perspectives, and it was really great to hear yours tonight.
Thank you, Marie-Sophie.
Thank you so much, Alexandra, for having all of us and hosting us so beautifully. It has been wonderful. And I also look forward to Could This Be Love and to reading all of the essays in full.
Thank you, Goitse. It was beautiful having you here as well.
Yeah, it was fantastic for me as well. It was a great opportunity of sharing and caring as well, of coming together. I always learn with these events where we can, especially this one that we got so personal, and that's not as usual to have. So I'm very looking forward to look at everyone's essays, and I recommend definitely for white unisons to get this book and to also get to learn more about the challenges of the color of love. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Yara. Thank you very much for making this space a very nice environment that you could all have opened up and just spoke about these kind of experiences, which are at parts very hurtful. So thank you once again. And it was amazing. So you all have a wonderful evening. Goodbye and good night. And thank you for Time of the Writer Festival for making this event possible. All right, then. Goodbye, everyone.